There are people who aren't looking to have a conversation. They're looking to provoke. They don't want to understand you. They want to wear you down. They're not interested in resolving anything. They just want you to lose control. And many times, they succeed. You may live with someone like this, someone who always has a cutting remark ready, who turns every dialogue into a battlefield, who belittles your emotions, ridicules your boundaries, and manipulates your silences. Someone who slowly drags you into losing yourself. It doesn't matter how patient you are. It doesn't matter how many times you try to explain how you feel with respect. It doesn't matter how pure your intention is. The other person always finds a way to turn everything into a problem, to sow guilt where there was clarity, to create tension where there was calm. And the most exhausting part of all is that deep down you know you don't want to keep living like this. But something stops you. A bond, a fear, a habit, a promise. You learn to bite your tongue, to justify the unjustifiable, to say it's not a big deal while swallowing tears in silence. You learn to stay quiet to avoid conflict, to give in even when it meant betraying yourself, to stay close even though something in you was begging for distance. And that something began to fade. You became more insecure, more irritable, more anxious, until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the peace in your eyes you once knew. That's the silent harm of difficult people. They don't always scream. Sometimes they manipulate with gestures, with indifference, with sarcasm. They don't always hit. Sometimes they hurt through omission, through emotional blackmail, through subtle disdain. They don't always threaten. Sometimes they plant doubts in your self-esteem until you stop trusting your own perception. And it's in that emotional terrain where you lose, not when the other yells at you, but when you stop listening to yourself. Not when the other dominates, but when you make yourself small just to avoid discomfort. Not when the other attacks, but when you begin to believe that maybe the problem is you, but it isn't. And this episode exists to remind you of that, to give you real, practical, and deeply stoic tools that return the emotional control that person took from you, not to destroy the other, not to humiliate them, not to win, but to step out of the game with dignity, to breathe in peace again, to make decisions from serenity, not from resentment, because no one deserves to live trapped in a relationship, family, romantic, work, or friendship that only exhausts, confuses, and weakens. No one deserves to have to explain over and over again basic things like respect, boundaries, and mutual care. No one is obligated to keep giving chances to someone who only knows how to use them to wound. But of course, this is not about cutting ties without reflection. It's not about hatred or impulsive reactions. It's about learning to look with different eyes, stoic eyes, with a mind that no longer gets swept away by anger, but also no longer allows itself to be crushed by guilt. This isn't an episode for the vengeful. It's for weary souls who want to heal without becoming cold, for those who have been too good for too long and are now ready to be fair with themselves too. Here we won't talk about cheap emotional manipulation. We won't use hollow phrases like "stay away from toxic people" as if it were that simple. Because many times the difficult person is someone you love, someone you share a roof with, someone you can't or don't want to let go of right away. And you need more than cliches. You need practical philosophy. You need inner clarity. You need direction. That's what we're going to build in this session. We're going to reclaim peace without losing compassion. We're going to understand that setting boundaries isn't selfishness, it's emotional intelligence. That walking away isn't always escape. Sometimes it's self-care. That silence isn't weakness if you choose it from inner strength. And that you're not responsible for saving someone who doesn't want to stop destroying. As Marcus Aurelius said, everything that disturbs us has power over us only if we grant it. Today we're going to take back that power, not through reaction but through reflection, not through hate but through clarity, Not to change that difficult person, but so that you stop being dragged by them. Because at the end of the day, the smartest way to deal with difficult people is to treat yourself with the respect, firmness, and calm you deserve. And from there, everything starts to fall into place, not by miracle, but by decision. Get ready. You're about to begin a journey of deep emotional liberation, guided by the wisdom of those who, more than 2,000 years ago, already knew what many still ignore today, that it's not about changing the other, but about learning to govern yourself. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving in the comments, "From today on, I don't negotiate my peace." That phrase will be your anchor. A reminder that you are here to take back control over your inner world, not to keep handing it over to those who only bring disorder. This is the moment to show yourself that your peace is not a favor to be begged for, but a right to be protected with firmness. Without further delay, let's begin. Stoic lesson. First, you are not responsible for their poison. There are people who have an extraordinary ability to poison the air without saying a word. People who can fill a room with tension just by walking in. Who don't need to shout to manipulate or argue to do harm. Sometimes with just one gesture, a calculated pause, a comment disguised as humor. They manage to disturb your inner state without ever touching you. And the most dangerous part is that for years, you believed it was your fault. That if someone spoke to you with contempt, you must have provoked it. That if they responded with sarcasm, maybe you were just too sensitive. That if they hurt you, it was because you didn't know how to communicate properly. And so, you started carrying guilt that never belonged to you. Explaining yourself more than you should. Giving in. Justifying the unjustifiable. But Epictetus, more than 2,000 years ago, had already warned you with one simple yet powerful truth. You do not control what others do, you only control how you respond. And that means you are not responsible for other people's emotional poison. You are not the source of their darkness. You are not the cause of their bitterness, resentment, or instability. The one who chooses to intoxicate does so from their own internal chaos. And that is their burden, not yours. However, what is yours is what you do with it. Because even though you can't stop someone from throwing a criticism, a mockery, or a contemptuous gesture at you, you can decide whether those things enter you or bounce off your emotional boundaries. Think of it this way. Would you willingly drink a glass of poison knowing it would make you sick? Then why do you take in words filled with emotional venom as if they were truth? Why do you absorb gestures laced with contempt as if they were facts? Why do you allow someone else's poison to enter your soul as if it were something you deserved to carry? Most difficult people don't want to understand you. They want to control you. They want you to react, to wear yourself out, to defend yourself. Because once you're in that game, you're no longer choosing freely. You're responding from your wounds. And in that space, the other wins. Not because they're right, but because they've pulled you into their territory. The real victory isn't changing the other person, but not becoming infected by their poison. Not from cold indifference, but from full awareness. The kind that allows you to look at someone hurtful and say inwardly, "This isn't mine. I don't accept this. This does not define who I am." That is Stoic wisdom. And to develop it, you need practice. You need to unlearn years of emotional conditioning. You need to stop looking for endless explanations for behaviors that don't deserve to be justified. You need to recognize, with humility and firmness, that you're no longer going to absorb someone else's poison as if it were your duty to purify it. Because it isn't. Your task is not to rescue someone drowning in their own ego. Your task is not to drown with them. Yes, you can have compassion. Yes, you can understand that the difficult person probably acts from their own wounds. But compassion is not a burden. Understanding is not submission. And love is not self-destruction. There's a clear line between being empathetic and becoming a container for someone else's pain. That line is called an emotional boundary, And it begins when you allow yourself to say, what you do speaks of you, how I respond speaks of me. And what you choose today is to stop carrying someone else's guilt. Because every time you take a poisoned comment personally, you're abandoning your center. You're letting the other person pull you into their storm. And what you deserve is to live from calm, not from reactivity. Remember this every time a difficult person tries to throw you off balance. Their poison is their responsibility. You alone decide whether to let it in. And yes, at first, it's hard, because you've been trained to react, to defend, to absorb. But with practice, each time you choose not to react, you grow stronger. Each time you choose not to take the conflict to bed, you sleep more peacefully. Each time you decide not to carry emotions that aren't yours, you feel lighter inside. That is the Stoic goal. And that is your new starting point. From today onward, you are no one's emotional trash bin. From today onward, you are no longer available to absorb more poison. From today onward, you return to yourself the right to live in clarity, not in someone else's shadow. That's not coldness, that's dignity. That's not selfishness, that's self-respect. And it is the first step, the most crucial one, in learning to deal with difficult people intelligently, not to beat them, not to punish them, but to not lose yourself. Because you're no longer here to be strong inside someone else's chaos. You're here to never abandon yourself again. Stoic lesson. Second, the wise choose their environment with calm. For a long time you were told that enduring was a virtue, that being patient was a sign of maturity, that not giving up in a difficult relationship was proof of loyalty, and you believed it, and you gave everything, and you wore yourself out, you endured hurtful words out of love, you justified the unjustifiable out of habit, you stayed in dynamics that drained your soul out of fear of seeming weak. But Marcus Aurelius said it with absolute clarity. Choose not to be dragged by what is not noble, and that includes choosing not to stay where there is no longer peace, not staying where your light dims, where your dignity is questioned, where your emotional stability is constantly hanging by a thread. You are not here to be anyone's emotional martyr. You didn't come into this life to be the container for what others don't know how to handle. You weren't born to carry wounds that aren't yours out of habit, guilt, or misunderstood loyalty. A difficult person is not always a monster. Sometimes it's someone you love, someone who suffers, someone who doesn't know how to love well, but insists on staying close. And that hurts. It hurts because you wish they would change. It hurts because you still remember the good. It hurts because part of you believes that if you just endure a little more, things will get better. But how many times have you already waited? How many times have you forgiven the unforgivable just to avoid conflict? How many times have you chosen their peace over your own? And the saddest part is that no one applauds that sacrifice. Because from the outside, it looks normal. It looks like you're understanding, that you're mature, that you're doing the right thing, but you know what it has cost you inside. You know what you've swallowed. You know what you've lost of yourself trying to hold up what cannot be held. Stoicism isn't about enduring everything with a forced smile. It's about living with virtue, with wisdom, with inner direction. And that includes surrounding yourself with people who don't attack your emotional balance every day. It's not about cutting off every bond that makes you uncomfortable. It's about being conscious of your environment, about stopping the romanticization of pain, about understanding that distance isn't always coldness. Sometimes it's self-respect. The wise don't try to control others. They don't try to change them, nor do they blame them forever. But the wise understand something essential. If you choose to remain in an environment that harms you, then you are also part of the harm. And that's not punishment, it's responsibility. It's accepting that you cannot control someone else's character, but you can choose how much access they have to your inner world. The calm of the wise begins with what they tolerate, with what they permit, with what they decide to let go of when there is no more growth, only decay. Sometimes walking away is the highest act of love you can give yourself. And it doesn't have to be with hatred or drama or revenge. It can be with tenderness, with respect, with silence, but with firmness. You can understand someone and still recognize that they're not good for you. You can honor the connection and still choose to leave. You can still wish them well from a distance. The environment you choose every day shapes your character. And if you are exposed daily to an emotional battlefield, you will live in defense mode, in permanent tension, and that prevents you from blooming. Marcus Aurelius also said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of your thoughts." And I'll add, the soul also adapts to the color of your environment. If everything around you is gray, don't expect to feel radiant. If all you receive are reproaches, don't blame yourself for feeling confused. If every interaction is a war, don't be surprised that you live on high alert. The wise do not blame the weather, but they wear a coat. They don't curse the storm, but they know how to take shelter. They don't fight the wind, but they change direction if necessary. And you have that right. The right to choose environments that nourish you, not drain you. The right to prioritize relationships where you can breathe freely. The right to walk away from those who use your sensitivity as a weapon against you. That is not selfishness. It is maturity. It is emotional intelligence. It is living philosophy. And you don't have to do it all at once. You don't owe anyone endless explanations. Just start by observing who lifts you, who drains you, who supports you, who sinks you, and then act with the calm of the wise. Without shouting, without attacking, but also without stepping back. You choose whether to stay exposed to the poison or to build a space where you can be yourself without fear of being emotionally destroyed. Because that is the difference between surviving and living. And life, your life, deserves to be lived with dignity, with relationships that uplift, with bonds that heal, with spaces where you can grow without constantly defending yourself. The wise don't react. They don't endure by inertia. The wise choose. And today, you can start doing the same. Feeling exhausted from trying to remain calm around people who only seek to provoke doesn't mean you are weak. It simply means you are ready to live from your center, not from someone else's chaos. If you've ever felt tired of yielding to avoid conflict, subscribing might seem like a small gesture, but to us it means everything. It allows us to keep building this refuge for souls who choose firmness without losing compassion. Here, you will learn to protect your peace, even surrounded by storms. Your boundary isn't coldness, it's wisdom. Stoic lesson 3. Your reaction is sacred territory. They can provoke you, they can yell at you, they can manipulate you with emotional blackmail, with sarcasm, with looks of contempt. They can strike exactly where it hurts the most, but even then, your reaction will still be yours. That's what no one can take away from you. The right to decide how to respond, and that right, even if you sometimes forget it, is sacred. Seneca taught this with undeniable force. There is no greater slavery than surrendering your spirit to someone else's whim. And you know it. Because at some point, without realizing it, you handed over that power. You reacted with anger when someone manipulated you. You cried in frustration when someone humiliated you. You justified yourself for hours when someone accused you of something you didn't even do. And every time that happened, something inside you wore down, because it wasn't the situation itself, but the feeling of being pulled out of your center, of having responded from the wound, not from your will, of having allowed someone to press your emotional buttons, and you didn't know how to stop it. But here is the Stoic truth that changes everything. No one can disturb you without your consent. Insults, provocations, injustice, they exist. But your reaction is not automatic. Your reaction is a choice. One you can start reclaiming right now. Think calmly. The world may be in chaos. The difficult person may be unloading all their toxicity on you. But if you choose not to enter that game, you are winning without fighting. You are protecting your sacred territory. That territory is not arrogance, it is composure, it is self-control, it is virtue in motion. And it's not about suppressing what you feel, it's about creating space between the stimulus and the response. That small space, that second of clarity, is where your real power lives. When a difficult person provokes you, they do it with an intention to unbalance you, to destabilize you, to pull you out of yourself. Because the more you react, the more control they have over you. The more you lose composure, the more you validate their game. The more you justify yourself, the more you drift from your center. But when you choose silence, pause, and non-reaction, something happens that completely disarms the aggressor. They no longer have power. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to have an immediate opinion, and you've already won half the battle." Because when you rule your mind, no one else can rule it for you. The difficult person will continue to be who they are. Don't get confused. This isn't a method to change the other person. It's training so you don't get dragged down by them. And that training begins in the everyday. When you choose not to respond to a provocation, when you breathe before replying to an attack, when you observe the chaos without becoming part of it. Seneca also said that the wise are known not by what they say, but by what they don't say, not by how they react, but by how they choose their response. And you can start choosing differently, not from submission, but from the invisible strength of someone who knows themselves, who knows what triggers them, who decides not to give that power to just anyone. Because if every time someone provokes you, you explode, then you become a slave to everyone. But if every time someone provokes you, you remain composed, then you become free. And yes, there will be days when you fail. Days when you explode, days when you react before you think. That's part of the journey too. But what matters is that now you know there is another option, a more dignified one, a smarter one, a more you option. From today forward, every time a difficult person tries to throw you off, imagine a space between what they do and what you choose to do. And in that space, choose. Not from rage, not from ego, from your peace. Because reacting is surrendering, responding is choosing, and you are here to stop living in reaction mode and start living in conscious choice mode. Your energy is sacred. Don't hand it over to someone who only knows how to drain it. Your composure is your power. Don't negotiate it in arguments that lead nowhere. The difficult person wants an opponent. You will offer them a wall of serenity, not to defeat them, but to prevent them from defeating you from within. That's the real victory, the one who can be challenged and still remain in command of themselves. From now on, your reaction will be your temple, a space where no one enters without permission, a fertile ground where only you decide what emotions are planted and which are not, a sacred territory, yours and no one else's. Stoic lesson fourth, difficult people are also internal tests. We don't always choose who crosses our path. Sometimes life puts people in our way who demand more from us than we think we have. More patience, more tolerance, more temperance. And with every encounter, every friction, every conflict, the same question arises. Why is this happening to me? You might think it's bad luck. You might think you attract conflictive people. You might even fall into the idea that it's your job to fix them, that your mission is to teach, to change, to save them. But Epictetus, with the blunt wisdom of the Stoics, would offer you a different view. Difficulties are not obstacles, they are exercises for the soul. And in that sense, the difficult person is not just there to annoy you. They are there to train you, to show you where you still don't master your character, where you still react, where it still hurts, where you still need to grow. This isn't about justifying mistreatment or romanticizing toxic relationships. It's about understanding that if it's happening, if that difficult person is part of your reality, then you can use the experience to strengthen yourself. The Stoic doesn't try to avoid every conflict. They try to learn from each one. They don't expect everything to be harmonious. They aim to be virtue within the chaos. When someone yells at you, for example, you have two options. yell back, or listen to the echo of your wounded pride and learn to tame it. When someone manipulates you, you can fall into the trap or recognize the pattern and start setting boundaries. When someone provokes you with sarcasm or indifference, you can respond with resentment or choose composure as your shield. Each time a difficult person shows up, the world isn't punishing you. It's showing you how steady you are. It's inviting you to observe your reaction, to discover what gets triggered, what shakes you, what throws you off balance, and from there to work on yourself. Is it easy? It's brutal, because it requires looking inward. It means stopping the habit of focusing on what the other is doing wrong, and starting to ask yourself, what is this awakening in me? Why does it affect me so much? What part of me still needs affirmation or protection? And there lies the real gold, realizing that this difficult person is also an unintentional teacher. Someone who, without meaning to, is giving you the material for your evolution, not through blind suffering, but through conscious awareness. Marcus Aurelius knew this, and that's why he wrote to remind himself daily that the world is full of fools, aggressors, and unjust people. And even so, he chose not to be like them. The true victory is not to resemble the one who has harmed you. That's what he said, and that's what he practiced, because he understood that he couldn't control the outside world, but he could strengthen himself internally to avoid being dragged by it. And that's exactly what you're called to do. It's not about staying where you're being harmed. It's about looking at the situation with new eyes before making a decision. It's about pausing between judgment and action. It's about asking yourself, is this person showing me something I still haven't worked on? What part of me is reacting and why? What emotional skill do I need to cultivate in this? Maybe it's firmness, maybe it's clarity, maybe it's temperance, or maybe it's the courage to walk away with dignity. Whatever it is, that interaction is revealing something in you, and that's where the real Stoic work lies, not in endlessly blaming the other, but in growing through them. The difficult person doesn't have to be your enemy. They can be your mirror. They can be the alarm that reminds you there are still wounds to heal, still boundaries to strengthen, still emotions to master. Every time you face a hurtful attitude, you have an opportunity to become wiser, stronger, freer, because emotional freedom isn't achieved in peaceful retreats. It's forged in the middle of conflict, when you can hold your calm without numbing yourself, when you can set boundaries without losing compassion, when you can say enough without carrying hate. Seneca would put it like this: greatness is not in never falling, but in rising each time with greater awareness. And you have fallen, but you are rising. With every difficult interaction, with every tense conversation, with every discussion that forces you to choose between reacting or evolving, you are training. This is not a self-help episode. It's a call to clarity, to stop seeing the other only as a threat, and start seeing them also as an invitation to self-mastery. Will the difficult person change? Maybe not. Will they remain unfair? Probably. Will they understand your point of view? Almost never. But that doesn't matter, because you're not here to win external battles. You're here to avoid losing yourself, and each time you choose to respond from virtue rather than from the wound, you're reclaiming sacred ground within you. That's the purpose of this lesson. Not for you to endure the unbearable, but for you to discover your own greatness in the eye of the storm. And when that happens, when you manage to remain centered, even in front of the most difficult person you know, you'll understand you weren't being punished. You were being tempered, forged, refined, like steel, like the sage, like a true Stoic. Stoic Lesson 5th. Boundaries are an expression of self-respect. There are moments when you simply can't keep giving in, not because you don't love, not because you don't understand, not because you lack empathy, but because you are losing yourself in the process. For far too long you confused being a good person with enduring everything. Someone, whether directly or silently, taught you that setting boundaries was selfish. That saying, "this is enough," was aggressive. that walking away from a difficult relationship was betrayal, and you believed it, so you stayed. You stayed silent. You kept tolerating every bit of contempt, every manipulation, every hurtful word, as if it were your duty to remain even where there was no longer respect. But Marcus Aurelius said it with a clarity that transcends centuries. Love others, but preserve your sovereignty. And that means knowing when someone has crossed that invisible yet sacred line that separates connection from abuse, patience from resignation, compassion from useless self-sacrifice. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring for yourself too. It's not abandoning the other, it's stopping the abandonment of yourself. And what is a boundary? It's a silent declaration that says, I respect you, but I won't let you destroy my peace. I hear you, but I won't justify your aggression. I understand you, but I won't erase myself just to keep you comfortable. It's about defining an emotional space where you decide what enters and what doesn't. What behaviors are tolerated and which are not. What words are acceptable and which will never touch your soul again. But of course, setting boundaries with a difficult person is not easy, because many of them are used to crossing them without consequence. They take your silence as permission, they see your patience as weakness, and when you finally draw a line, they accuse you of having changed. They call you cold, distant, cruel. They try to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. But it's not guilt, it's awakening, because a boundary is not against them, it's for you. It's telling yourself, I don't have to keep breaking myself just so someone else doesn't feel uncomfortable. I don't have to prove my worth by letting someone trample it. I don't have to stay where there's no reciprocity or mutual care. Seneca taught that dignity is the clearest reflection of self-love, and no one can take your dignity away unless you hand it over. But protecting that dignity requires resolve. It requires being willing to make others uncomfortable. It requires learning to live with the guilt that comes when you stop pleasing. And in that moment, in that precise moment when you set your boundary and the other resists it, that's where you need the most inner strength. Because that's the true test of everything you've learned. Will you backtrack out of fear of losing their affection? Will you give in again just to avoid conflict? Or will you stay firm, even knowing they may never understand? A boundary is not punishment. It's clarity, and any relationship that cannot survive an honest expression of your boundaries was never healthy to begin with. Want to know if a relationship is real? Set a boundary and watch. The person who values you will listen. Maybe it'll be hard at first, maybe there will be resistance, but if there is real love, with time they'll adjust. The person who only wanted to use you will get angry, pull away, or try to make you feel guilty. Either way, the boundary will liberate you. It will free your time, your energy, your identity. It will return you to yourself. And from that place, you'll begin to build relationships differently. Not from the fear of abandonment, but from the desire to connect without losing yourself. Because self-love, true self-love, is not about pampering yourself. It's about protecting yourself with the same strength you once used to defend those who hurt you. You don't have to scream it. You don't need to make a scene. You just need to stand in silence, with presence, with the peace of someone who knows that for the first time they are choosing with maturity. Marcus Aurelius said, "Do not respond to evil with evil, but do not let evil take root." And when a difficult person insists on crossing your boundaries, you don't need to hate them. You just need to stop giving them access to your most sacred space, to your inner world, to your vital energy. That's where the real boundary begins, not in what you tell them, but in what you stop allowing yourself to tolerate. Because your peace matters. Your dignity matters, your presence matters, and no one, absolutely no one, has the right to poison them. So if you've come this far, wondering if you're overreacting, if it's your fault, if you're being too harsh for wanting to set a boundary, let me remind you with stoic firmness, you are not overreacting. It's not your fault. You're not being harsh, you are being brave. You are, at last, beginning to build a life where self-respect is not up for negotiation, and that is one of the most stoic acts you can commit. Stoic lesson 6. Compassion is not submission. Maybe you have a vast heart, and maybe you've given it away more times than you'd like to admit, to wounded people, to broken people, to difficult people who never knew how to care for it, because you always tried to understand. You always looked beyond the surface. You justified their anger because you sensed pain behind it. You tolerated sarcasm because you intuited a backstory. You forgave coldness, contempt, even humiliation, because you thought maybe they just didn't know how to love any better, and that speaks volumes about you, about your depth, your empathy, about how deeply you care. But there comes a moment when you have to ask yourself, is this compassion healing me or destroying me? Seneca said it with absolute clarity. It is not about hardening the heart, but about protecting the soul. And protecting your soul doesn't mean closing off. It doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb. It doesn't mean losing your ability to see the humanity in imperfection. It means understanding that you can recognize another's pain without allowing that pain to invade your life. You can see that this difficult person acts from their wounds and still walk away. You can feel compassion for their suffering and still decide you will no longer stay in a place where pain is recycled, because compassion is not endurance. Compassion is not self-betrayal in order to keep others comfortable. Compassion is not becoming the emotional sponge for someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own healing. The Stoic sees the wounds of the world but does not get swept away by them. They observe, acknowledge and understand them, but they do not carry them as if they were their own. And you have been carrying too much. You've confused your ability to love with an obligation to hold everything together. You've confused your tenderness with a sentence to silence. You've confused your desire to help with a duty to endure. But you are not here for that. You are here to be free, to be firm, to be wise. And wisdom is not hardness. It is discernment. It is knowing you can feel compassion for someone and still recognize that the relationship is making you sick. It is knowing you can still wish them well from a distance, without hatred, without resentment, without needing to become their savior, because saving someone else is impossible if they don't want to be saved. And you cannot keep drowning for someone who doesn't even want to float. That's the hardest part of this lesson. Accepting that love is not enough, accepting that understanding doesn't solve everything, accepting that your compassion will not change someone who doesn't want to change. And that does not make you a bad person. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't mean you are abandoning anyone. It means you are saving yourself. You are choosing yourself. You are finally stopping the sacrifice of your emotional health just so no one calls you too harsh. Epictetus might have put it this way: have compassion for the blind, but do not gouge out your own eyes. You can acknowledge the darkness in someone else. You can walk beside them to a point, but you cannot let that darkness extinguish your light, because when that happens, compassion turns into submission, into misdirected sacrifice, into a silent form of self-neglect. And what's the point of understanding everyone else if you leave yourself out? What's the point of forgiving others if you can't forgive yourself for not protecting your own heart? What's the point of saving relationships if it means destroying yourself in the process? Seneca said that the wise act with kindness, but never allow themselves to be used. And you have reached this point in your life not to become cynical, but to become selective, not to hate, but to protect. And protecting yourself is not selfishness. It is justice. It is balance. It is wisdom. The difficult person may have 1,000 reasons for their behavior, and many of them may be real, but that doesn't give them permission to keep hurting you. Your compassion must not be the entry ticket to mistreatment. It must not be the reason you stay in a connection that weakens you. It must not be the excuse for ignoring your own boundaries. Because when you abandon yourself to help someone else, you are no longer loving. You are disappearing, and that is not virtue. That is forgetting. Forgetting yourself, forgetting your right to a peaceful life, forgetting your worth. From now on, you can look with tenderness, without letting them destroy you. You can listen with empathy, without absorbing every word as if it were absolute truth. You can understand another's pain and still keep your distance. That is mature compassion. That is rooted love. That is philosophy lived. And if anyone ever made you feel like you were too sensitive, too kind, too patient, maybe they were right. Not because it's a flaw, but because now you know that sensitivity also deserves care, that kindness also needs defense, that patience also has a limit, and that limit is yours to define, not with anger, not with shouting, but with the calm of someone no longer willing to die, trying to save what doesn't want to be saved. From today forward, your compassion will remain alive, but it will no longer be submission. It will become strength. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to stop handing your peace to those who only bring conflict. Subscribe and comment, "My peace is not negotiable," to reaffirm your commitment to a life that is firm, clear, and free from unnecessary suffering. This is only the first step toward a life where your boundaries aren't explained, they are honored. And when you reach the 9th lesson, you'll uncover a truth that may forever change how you protect your inner world. Don't miss it. It might be exactly what your soul was waiting for. Stoic lesson 7th. You don't need the last word. There are battles that aren't won by speaking. They're won by knowing when to stay silent. When dealing with a difficult person, this truth becomes especially painful to learn, because everything in you wants to respond. Everything in you wants to defend yourself. You want to prove you're right, that you're not guilty, that you don't deserve the judgment, the mockery, or the cold indifference being thrown at you. But Epictetus warned with brutal clarity, don't argue with someone who seeks not truth, but victory. And very often that's what happens with difficult people. They don't want to listen, they don't want to understand, they don't want a resolution, they just want to win, to dominate, to impose. And if you're not alert, you can fall into the trap, get drawn into the game, start trying to explain the inexplicable, defend the obvious, justify yourself as if your dignity depended on convincing them. But that's just an illusion. And every time you fall for it, you lose a little more of yourself. Because no one wins in a conversation with someone who has no interest in understanding. Only exhaustion remains, only frustration, only emptiness. The need to have the last word comes from a wounded ego, from that inner voice that refuses to feel weak, humiliated, or misunderstood. But true power lies not in proving anything, but in not needing to. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose to be impenetrable to verbal poison." And silence, when chosen with wisdom, is the most powerful antidote, because sometimes the best response is none. Not out of cowardice, but out of clarity, because you realize it's not worth it. You don't need to go down into the mud just to prove you're clean. You don't need to wear yourself out trying to convince someone who has already chosen not to see you. And yes, it burns at first, because the ego wants to fight. It wants to regain control. It wants to scream, "That's not fair. That's not how it happened." Let me explain. But how many times have you done that already? How many times have you tried to put your truth into words, only to hit a wall? How many times have you ended up more exhausted after the discussion than before it began? Silence, when used wisely, is a form of self-care. It's an invisible boundary that says, I won't shatter myself just to be understood. I won't play this game. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to protect myself. And that is emotional maturity. That is Stoic intelligence. Because when you choose to remain silent, you're not accepting the lie. You're preserving your peace. You're refusing to step into a battle without rules, respect, or reason. There are people who, when cornered by their own chaos, attack. And when they can't hurt you with reason, they try with provocation. They hope you'll react. They hope you'll yell. They hope you'll say something they can later use against you. But when you don't, when you choose silence, balance, non-reaction, you disarm them. They lose the control they were trying to gain over you. That's what silence gives you, sovereignty over yourself. And no, it's not passivity, it's internal action. It's a way of saying, I choose not to be poisoned by this. I choose not to let your words enter me. I choose not to extend a conflict that only drains me. Seneca explained it this way: to answer every provocation is to surrender to it. And you're not here to surrender to every fire set by others. You're here to cultivate your center, to live from your core, to stay grounded without needing to prove your worth. Because your worth is not something you shout, it's something you live. Your dignity doesn't need explanation, it needs presence. Your truth doesn't need to be imposed, it needs to be embodied. And when a discussion becomes a dead-end cycle, when there's no longer dialogue but just noise, the best way to protect your mind is to step out, with silence, with composure, with the serenity of someone who no longer needs the last word to feel at peace. Think of it this way: would you rather be right or be calm? Would you rather convince or conserve your energy? Would you rather stay in conflict or move toward peace? Difficult people feed off conflict, but you don't have to sit at that table. You can choose emotional fasting, fertile silence, dignified retreat. And if they call you a coward for it, if they accuse you of being cold or uncaring, let them. Because you're no longer here to convince. You're here to be coherent with yourself. Every time you don't respond to a provocation, you're winning. Every time you choose not to enter the argument, you're growing. Every time you decide that your peace is worth more than your ego, you're freeing yourself. And that freedom, that is what no one can take from you. That is what marks the difference between a reactive life and a wise one. So next time you feel the burning urge to respond, to defend yourself, to have the last word, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, will this bring me peace or just drain me? Am I answering from my wound or from my wisdom? Do I need this or can I let it go? And if you can let it go, do it. With love, with firmness, with dignity, because sometimes not winning the argument is winning your life. Stoic lesson. 8th, walking away doesn't make you cruel, it makes you wise. Sometimes it's not about changing the other person, not about waiting for them, not about understanding them better. Sometimes it's simply about walking away. And even if it hurts to admit it, that too is love. Love for yourself. Because there comes a point where the damage is no longer justifiable, where understanding is no longer enough, where staying only deepens your disconnection from yourself. You've heard it so many times. Be patient. Give second chances. Don't give up on those you love. And you obeyed. You endured. You forgave. You waited. Waited for them to change, to realize, to appreciate your presence. But it didn't happen. Or maybe it did, for a while, and then everything returned to the same place. And in the middle of that cycle, you began to fade. You lost vitality. You collected sadness behind forced smiles. You disguised your exhaustion as maturity, until one day you understood something that changed everything. Not walking away is also a decision, and not always the right one. Marcus Aurelius said it without hesitation. What does not serve your inner peace must be discarded. And that includes people, situations, connections, not out of malice, not out of revenge, but out of wisdom. Because if someone pollutes your peace, manipulates you emotionally, makes you feel small, entangles you in circles of confusion and guilt, what more do you need to realize you don't belong there? The Stoic doesn't live numbed. He doesn't deny what he feels, but he also doesn't allow his life to be consumed, waiting for what never comes. If a relationship forces you to become someone you're not, if it demands that you sacrifice your dignity just to maintain the connection, if every encounter leaves you more drained than fulfilled, then it's not your place. Walking away doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you someone who finally understood that your energy is not infinite. And yes, it may hurt, especially when there's love, when there's history, when a part of you still dreams of what could have been. But the pain of leaving is temporary. The pain of staying where you're not valued is chronic. Epictetus put it like this: when you hand your peace over to another, you become their slave. And you weren't born to be anyone's emotional slave. You were born to build, to live with purpose, to surround yourself with people who uplift you, not drain you. Sometimes the greatest act of compassion is to let go. Let go of the need to fix what was broken from the beginning. Let go of the fantasy that your love can change what the other refuses to even face. Let go of the guilt of no longer carrying what's dragging you down. And that doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy, because walking away isn't just about not seeing someone anymore. It's also about saying goodbye to the part of yourself that still hoped for more. But in that goodbye, in that closure, there is rebirth. Because in the silence that follows your exit, your true self begins to speak, the one that had been silenced for so long, the one that deserved to breathe without fear, the one that knew for a while now that you deserved better. Walking away is not selfishness, it's responsibility to yourself. It's looking at the other with respect and at yourself with dignity. It's saying, I understand you, I even care for you, but I will not destroy myself just to stay here. And yes, people might judge you. They might call you cold, they might accuse you of giving up, but deep down you'll know it wasn't surrender, it was liberation. Seneca said the wise don't run away, but they know when to retreat. And now you have that wisdom, not because you became hard, but because you became clear, not because you stopped feeling, but because you learned to prioritize yourself. From this day on, you can walk away without hatred, without drama, without needing the other person to understand. Because not everything needs to be explained. Sometimes feeling it is enough. And then, acting. Walking away is choosing yourself. It's stopping the begging for love. It's no longer seeking understanding from someone who only destabilizes you. It's no longer fighting for space in a place where you were never allowed to be yourself. And when you do that, when you cross that threshold, when you take that step, something realigns within you. You feel lighter, truer to yourself, more at peace. Not because of what you lost, but because of what you recovered, your center, your clarity, your worth. So if you're there right now, in that crossroads with one foot in and one foot out, ask yourself, what is this relationship costing me? What part of me am I losing by staying? What life could begin if I had the courage to let go? And then, listen honestly, because deep down you already know the answer. You just need the courage to act on it. And when you do, when you take that step, you won't be cruel, you'll be wise and free. If this insight is helping you reclaim your peace amid difficult relationships, subscribe and become part of this space where we protect the mind, strengthen the soul, and learn to respond with wisdom, not exhaustion. Stoic, Lesson 9th. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. You're a deep person, someone who feels intensely, who reflects, who gives fully. And when someone enters your life, you don't hold back. You give time, you give presence, you give soul, you give space. You do it because you believe in the value of real connections, because you don't know how to fake what you don't feel. And deep down, you hope the other person will honor that offering as something sacred. But not everyone understands the sacred. Not everyone knows how to receive without harming, and even fewer know how to protect what they didn't work to build. Seneca said it with surgical precision. Open your heart with caution. Not everyone who approaches does so nobly. And that's hard to accept, because a part of you wants to believe everyone deserves a chance, that everyone has something good inside, that everyone, if treated with kindness, can bloom. But life has taught you something else. It's shown you that there are people who not only fail to value your inner world, but use it against you. People who take your confessions and twist them to manipulate, who feed off your emotions to destabilize you, who demand your emotional availability, but vanish when you're the one needing shelter. And the worst part is, sometimes you realize it too late, after you've already opened the gates. after you've already shared parts of yourself not meant for everyone, after you've already let your guard down. But this Stoic lesson isn't about blaming yourself. It's about learning discernment. It's about realizing your inner world is not a public square. It's a temple, and not everyone deserves to enter. Epictetus taught that we must be masters of our judgment, and that includes choosing deliberately who gets emotional access. Not from constant suspicion, but from the deep awareness that your energy, your peace, and your truth are limited resources. And giving them away without filter is a silent form of self-betrayal. Not everyone has the maturity to handle your sensitivity. Not everyone has the integrity to treat your vulnerability with respect. Not everyone knows what it means to be a safe place for another human being. And that's okay. It's not your job to teach them. It's not your mission to fix anyone. Your only task is to guard your emotional sanctuary, because when you open your inner world to just anyone, you end up full of doubt, emptiness, and broken pieces the other person didn't know how to care for. And you deserve more than that. You deserve people who come to add, not confuse. People who understand that entering your life is a privilege, not an entitlement. Marcus Aurelius said, "Not everyone who approaches should be received." And he was right, because some people show up with no intention of staying, or worse, with the intention to stay only as long as it benefits them. People who come in as guests and behave like owners. That's why this lesson is not about closing yourself off from the world. It's about building filters, choosing with care, observing before trusting, letting time reveal what anxiety to connect might blur, because you are valuable. Your story is valuable. Your silences, your wounds, your longings are valuable. And anyone who doesn't approach all of that with reverence doesn't belong. And this isn't said with bitterness. It's said with clarity, because the Stoic doesn't act from resentment, but from discernment. Not everyone who smiles is safe. Not everyone who says they care knows how to protect. Not everyone who stays contributes. And you're no longer in a stage of your life where you can afford to open up to what doesn't serve. From now on, pay closer attention. Does this person truly listen, or are they just waiting for their turn to speak? Do they respect your emotions, or only validate them when it suits them? Do they hold your silence with care, or use your words as ammunition? Do they build with you, or feed off your cracks? And if those answers aren't clear, don't rush to open up. Don't rush to give away what is most precious, your inner world. Because the soul, like a home, should not leave its door open all day. Not out of fear, but out of respect for what lives inside. And whoever wants in should knock with gentleness, wait, show you, honor you, and if they don't know how, let them pass, without hatred, without drama, without the need for endless explanation. Because your peace doesn't have to be at the mercy of whoever walks in, and your story is not a spectacle for the curious, its legacy, its fire, its root. Seneca said that wisdom also lies in knowing whom to open your life to, and you're learning that, to guard your spaces, to stop giving your energy away as if it costs nothing, to understand that the quality of your relationships begins with the quality of your choices, and when you do that, when you place that filter with serenity, something shifts inside you. You stop needing constant validation. You stop feeling guilty for not always being available. You stop confusing connection with dependence. And then finally, you begin to inhabit your inner world with presence, with love, with order, with the certainty that those who stay do so because they truly deserve to. And that is one of the wisest decisions you will ever make. Stoic lesson 10th. Your peace is not up for negotiation. There comes a moment in life when you stop justifying everything. You no longer care to understand every wound the other person carries. You no longer have the energy to excuse their actions. You're no longer willing to explain once again why something that hurts you shouldn't keep happening. And that moment marks a before and after, because you finally understand something that should be taught from childhood. Your peace is yours, and it's not negotiable. Marcus Aurelius repeated it like a mantra in his personal meditations. If something external disturbs your soul, the problem is not in the thing itself, but in your judgment about it, and you can change that judgment. And that phrase, once fully grasped, becomes armor. A truth as harsh as it is liberating. What unsettles you is not what happens, but what you allow to happen inside you. But how do you maintain that peace when you're surrounded by difficult people? How do you protect your balance when provocation is constant? When sarcasm, manipulation, or contempt show up like part of the daily routine? The Stoic answer is clear. Set boundaries where you once only offered understanding. Walk away where you once insisted. Stay silent where you once shouted to be heard. And remember, your peace doesn't need to be defended with fury, only protected with firmness. Many confuse peace with passivity. They think a peaceful person tolerates everything, that they don't respond, that they don't feel, that they're emotionally numb. But the true Stoic knows that inner peace is not inaction. It's a decision. It's the result of thousands of small, conscious choices. It's the ability to say no without guilt, to walk away from chaos without resentment, to choose not to enter every emotional war someone invites you to. Because conflict doesn't exist just because someone starts it. It persists when you agree to play. And you, who for so long played the role of calming other people's storms, who became the emotional anchor for people who never once asked how you felt. It's time you reclaimed the helm of your own soul. Yes, maybe that will make others uncomfortable. Maybe they'll call you cold. Maybe they'll accuse you of having changed. And it's true, you've changed. You're no longer willing to pay the price of losing yourself to preserve connections that preserve nothing. That's not arrogance, that's maturity. Because those who negotiate their peace just to avoid discomfort end up losing more than they ever imagined. They lose hours of rest. They lose excitement. They lose clarity. They lose connection to themselves. And you're tired, not of the other person, but of yourself. Every time you allow what deep down you know you shouldn't. This lesson is both a closing and a threshold. It closes the chapter of I can handle anything. And it opens the door to I choose to respect myself above all. Not to reject others, but to stop rejecting yourself. Not to become a stone, but to stop being a sponge for pain that was never yours to hold. Seneca warned that each of us is the guardian of our own mind. And if you let anyone wander freely inside, don't be surprised when it's left in chaos. Your peace is your home, and you decide who's invited. You decide how long they stay. You decide if that visitor deserves a place, or if it's time to shut the door. And here comes the most powerful part of this lesson. Peace is not defended with shouting. It's defended with boundaries, with distance, with silence, with absence. Because some battles are only won by not showing up, by not engaging, by not responding, by not going back. And that takes more strength than any argument. It takes more clarity than any speech. It takes more self-respect than any attempt to please. So from now on, remember this. If someone constantly disturbs your peace, don't normalize it. Don't excuse it. Don't over-spiritualize it. You're not here to heal everyone. You're here to protect your soul. And that begins by recognizing when a person, a relationship, or an environment is stealing the light you worked so hard to ignite. You can still be compassionate without numbing your intuition. You can still wish them well without giving away your calm. You can still love without abandoning yourself. Because if being with someone requires betraying yourself, that person isn't walking with you. They're erasing you. And you came into this life to expand, to exist, to fully inhabit your own presence without fear. And no one, absolutely no one, has the right to pollute that sacred inner space you fought so hard to clean. So the next time you face a provocation, a subtle manipulation, a conversation that drains your soul, ask yourself, does this bring me closer to peace or pull me away from it? And if the answer is that it pulls you away, act, not with rage, not with drama, with wisdom, with clarity, with the quiet elegance of someone who knows their peace is priceless. Because at this point in your journey, you are no longer here to merely survive. You are here to live, and to live in peace is the most intelligent, the most powerful, and the most stoic way. To endure any storm, there are wounds you can't see but you carry. They don't show on your skin, but they hurt more than any blow. They're the scars left by a word spoken with contempt, by a mockery repeated so many times that you started to believe it, by a cold silence when you needed nothing more than to feel seen, by a relationship where you felt lonelier than being alone. And the saddest part is that you got used to it. You got used to lowering your voice so the other wouldn't feel threatened, to giving in just to avoid a fight, to enduring out of loyalty, out of fear, out of hope, to staying even when something inside you was screaming it was time to leave. Sometimes no insult is needed to cause harm. A glance that dims your light is enough, a tone that shrinks you, a gesture that erases you. And when that happens again and again, something in you begins to erode. Your strength, your clarity, your dignity. But today, finally, you're waking up. You're starting to see with different eyes. And even though it's hard to accept, you know some things can't go on as they are. You can't keep living at war with the other and with yourself. This hasn't been just an episode about difficult people. It's been an act of reconnection with yourself. A reminder that your soul also needs space, that your energy deserves respect, that your inner voice cannot keep being ignored. Stoicism does not ask you to harden. It doesn't ask you to become a wall or to despise those who don't understand you. Stoicism offers tools to hold yourself steady amid the chaos without becoming it. It teaches you how to be firm without losing tenderness, to say no without hating, to walk away without resentment, to choose yourself without guilt. And yes, many won't understand. They'll say you're overreacting, that you should be more patient, that you're being selfish. But you'll know the truth, that you're saving yourself, that you're no longer postponing your well-being to avoid displeasing others, that you're recognizing your worth without needing to shout it. There are decisions that change everything, and they're not always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet act of not replying, of leaving a message unanswered, of not returning to a place where you felt invisible, of not explaining what should already be obvious, of staying silent and beginning the walk back to yourself. And you're not alone. Here in this community, many of us have been there. Many of us are learning, sometimes with tears. That peace is not negotiable. That respect is not begged for. That calm is not something you plead for. It's something you build, something you protect, something you defend. And if something you heard today resonated with you, if any word touched a part of you that's been quiet for too long, I invite you to stay with us. To subscribe, not just because of this episode, but because of what we are building together, a space where no one is judged, where perfection is not required, where vulnerability is honored as a path to strength. Here, you don't have to pretend that everything is okay. Here you can say, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I'm tired, and you'll be met with respectful silence or steady words, never judgment. Here, we don't worship hardness, we honor clarity. We don't idealize coldness, we value coherence. We don't follow the loudest voice, we walk with the truest one. So if this session gave you value, if it helped you wake up, if it reminded you who you are and what you're no longer willing to tolerate, I invite you to subscribe and comment. From today on, I don't negotiate my peace. Because that phrase is not just a slogan. It's a vow to yourself, an invisible line you draw between who you were and who you choose to be from this moment forward. And yes, it's going to hurt, because detachment hurts. It hurts to let go of connections that once gave you love, even if now they're draining your life. But that pain is sacred, because it's the price of emotional freedom. And you're paying it with courage, with awareness, with truth. There is no stoic path without discomfort, but neither is there real peace without difficult decisions. And you, by reaching this point, have already taken a huge step. Now it's time to sustain it. With small daily actions, with new words, with new company, with new invisible boundaries that no one can cross without your permission. You decide who enters. You decide what affects you. You decide what's worthy of your energy. And that decision, though it may seem small, changes everything. Thank you for trusting. Thank you for listening to yourself. Thank you for staying. We'll meet again in the next episode. Stronger, clearer, freer, together. Your voice matters here. Every comment strengthens and uplifts our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and shaping our shared Stoic identity. The most supported reflection will be pinned as the banner of this tribe of resilient minds. A community that does not flee from pain, but walks through it with courage, wisdom, and honor. There are decisions that seem small, but change everything. If something shifted inside you while listening, don't let the moment pass. Subscribing is not just a click. It's a decision, the decision to stop living asleep. The decision to walk with awareness, courage, and purpose. We'll see you in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we'll continue to explore the treasures of ancient wisdom applied to modern life. Now take this moment to go deeper. Explore more recommended podcast sessions to continue your Stoic journey. Follow us so you don't miss a single reflection that might meet you exactly when life feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to walk with you. When life feels heavy, when calm is hard to keep, when you need words to remind you who you are. Not following us means risking missing the exact lesson that could bring back the peace you've been searching for. Until we meet again, remember, you are the only master of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.